Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Von Manor, where Roger and I have returned because it's Wednesday. That means it's Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Every Wednesday, we'll talk about a certain comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. Steve Donoghue over on his channel will talk about the same comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. It is our world's finest team up that we do once a week. And this week, we're talking about Galactus and the Fantastic Four and John Byrne's version of Galactus in the Fantastic Four. So I am reading right at this moment every issue of Fantastic Four from the first run of the Fantastic Four, which ran from 1961 up to 1996, when they canceled the book and brought it right back, and then canceled it again and brought it right back. And it's kind of been going on like that for a while. Although there was that time they canceled Fantastic Four and didn't bring it right back for a while. That sucked. But anyway, this is back in the 1980s when John Byrne was doing the book. And John Byrne just had a fantastic run on the Fantastic Four. And it's legendary, in comicdom, because it really, really was extraordinarily good. It was the best run on the Fantastic Four probably ever, except for the original run of Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. The Jack Kirby Stan Lee run was, of course, the best. The first 100 odd issues of the Fantastic Four around there, I think. I can't really remember. But it was a lot. They did a lot of issues together. And it was a wonderful, wonderful time on that book. But the Fantastic Four continued to be good, but it was really good when John Byrne took over as both writer and artist on the Fantastic Four. And the story I'm talking about today is the one in which Galactus returns, the Fantastic Four's most powerful villain, who travels through space. He's a giant who travels through space and devours whole planets to keep himself alive. So, he's not someone to mess with. And Galactus normally has a herald that'll go off ahead of him to scout, to find the planets for him. He has such vast technology, I don't know why he just doesn't have probes that he can kind of send everywhere. But he has a scout, he has a herald. And the first herald was the Silver Surfer, who became a very popular character in the Marvel Universe. And I'm going to pull out this. This is my Fantastic Four John Byrne Omnibus Volume 1. There are two of these. This one has a fabulous cover right here. And we're going to talk about 3 issues of the Fantastic Four, which have this story where Galactus returns to Earth, and the Fantastic Four have to battle Galactus once again. Now, they've battled Galactus a few times, and Reed Richards has always managed to get rid of Galactus using his intelligence, because Reed Richards, he's really smart. But they could be in real trouble this time, we'll see. I took off the dust jacket so this wouldn't slide around, and also, it has a really cool picture behind the dust jacket, which is also really awesome. That's cool. That's pretty cool too. So let's take a look at these stories, shall we? Let's open it up to issue 242. So I mentioned the heralds of Galactus. So Galactus, he was pretty hard up for a herald at one point, and he got this guy called Terrax. Terrax, who is an evil villain in his own right. And then Galactus gave him unlimited cosmic powers and told him to be his herald, and just expected everything would go all right, and that Terrax wouldn't try to stab him in the back and kill him or anything. Well, Galactus was wrong. And in this issue, Terrax is flying through space. There he is. There's Terrax the Untamed, who was originally just an alien villain who became Galactus's herald. And so he's flying through space on this lump of rock because he's got some kind of earth powers or something. And he's heading towards the Earth to cause mass destruction. Now, Christmas had just ended on Earth. There's Reed Richards and Susan Richards there putting down their high-tech Christmas tree. And everything's normal on Earth. We've got the Thing here. Now, at this point, at this particular point in the comic, the Thing has reverted to his earlier version. Before he was a rocky thing, he was just a lumpy thing. And John Byrne reverted him back to the lumpy thing for a few issues. I think the only reason he did that is because he wanted to draw a lumpy thing instead of a rocky thing for a while. I really don't know why, but that seems to be the only reason. And Johnny Storm is hanging out with a character who turns out to be kind of important. This is Frankie Ray, which is one of Johnny Storm's girlfriends. Now, Johnny Storm generally, up to this point, has had very terrible luck as far as his love life is concerned, and it's not going to get any better. But at this point, he's hanging out with Frankie Ray, who is also a Human Torch. Her dad, as it turns out, was the creator of the original Human Torch. And he was kind of a psycho, and he made his kid a Human Torch as well. A lot of things about her origin didn't make a lot of sense, but she was this other Human Torch, and at this point, her superhero name was Frankie Ray. She doesn't have a superhero name at this point. So she's just like the other Human Torch who flies around with Johnny. But she does end up kind of important, especially when Terrax shows up and decides to cause lots of destruction. And one of the first things he does is he knocks off the top two stories of the Baxter Building, the Fantastic Four's home base. He just wipes them out. So we know that we're in a story which is going to have, a lot of destruction in it. And so we have scenes of awesome battles. Got Terrax knocked halfway across the city at the bottom there. And so they're not quite sure why Terrax has returned at this point. Just that he's here to cause massive destruction. And also what he does, because his powers seem pretty much unlimited, is he lifts up the entire island of Manhattan, puts a force field around it, and floats it into space. Stuff like this sometimes happens in comic books. And so he does that. And it's an invisible force field that's around Manhattan. But Sue Storm is able to use her powers to make it visible. And all the other superheroes in New York, of course, notice this. So this is one difference in this Galactus story. One thing that's different in this Galactus story from the earlier Galactus stories is that the other superheroes actually notice, hey, this is going on in this city where I live. Because earlier, like when Galactus first showed up, there were other superheroes, but the only superheroes who showed up to fight Galactus were the Fantastic Four. And I don't know that we ever got an explanation about where the other superheroes were. But that was, I guess, still relatively early in the Marvel Universe. And, they didn't figure they had to explain it. But at this point, it's the 1980s. This world is so cohesive and entwined, and all the superheroes know each other, and it's such an interconnected universe that if Galactus shows up, you pretty much have to know where the other superheroes are, because they obviously would show up. And when the whole city is lifted up off of the Earth and is sent out into space, you figure the other superheroes would show up, and indeed they do. So we get appearances from Spider-Man, Daredevil, Iron Man, and Thor. It's the mighty Thor. Now, he's the guy you want to show up in a situation like this. And John Byrne draws Thor really good, so that's pretty cool. It's sort of a shame John Byrne didn't have a run on Thor in the first run of Thor. That would have been cool. So all the other superheroes show up, but the Fantastic Four is right there with Terrax, and they're like, okay, what's the deal? Why are you doing all this? And so Terrax is tired of being Galactus' herald, surprise, surprise, and he wants the Fantastic Four to kill Galactus. And Galactus's ship is floating real close. Galactus happens to be starving at this point, and so is probably going to destroy the Earth anyway. And so Terrax is like, you go kill Galactus. And that's when we get this fantastic issue, where on the cover it says, everyone versus Galactus. Need we say more? It's not actually everyone. It's just the Avengers and the Fantastic Four. But that makes a good enough story, yes it is. And so, Shall Earth Endure is our main story. And there's the Baxter building there with the top 2 stories cut off by Terrax. And Sue Storm is trying to maintain the visibility of the force field and using all of her powers to do that. There's Frankie Ray there in her shiny bathing suit. And she doesn't even believe Galactus. Up to this point, she's like, Galactus? But I always thought, the newspaper said, you mean he's real? She didn't think Galactus was real. She doesn't believe the news, And so here we have the city floating up there in outer space. There's Galactus' ship. We have the Avengers getting involved, trying to pull themselves together. And we have Galactus. There's the big guy himself. Now, Galactus is such a tremendously powerful villain that he's kind of a hard guy to defeat because he's got so much power. And so, like I said, up to this point, Reed Richards has always managed to defeat him pretty much by tricking him, by using his intelligence. Because really, going toe-to-toe with Galactus, that's pretty tough for the Fantastic Four, because he's just so powerful. Now, at this point, though, he's starving to death. And so that's perfect for a villain like this guy. Look at him. That's a very villainous look. So the Fantastic Four go out to talk to Galactus. And they're like, well, you know why we're here. What ends up happening is Galactus and Terrax have a battle. And they have a battle on top of the World Trade Center, which is always odd to see now. Back in these days, in the 20th century, when the World Trade Center was still there, before all the crappy, horrible, awful stuff that's happened in the 21st century, the 80s, they were a better time. And so here we have, well, not in every way, but in a lot of ways. And so here we have Galactus and Terrax about to square off. And so Galactus pretty much takes care of Terrax because he's just so powerful. But now Galactus is going to eat the Earth. He's going to eat the Earth. Because he's starving. He's just like, you know what? Screw it. But now we get what we've been waiting for, which is the Avengers show up. So now we have the Avengers and the Fantastic Four who are going to stand up to Galactus. And their big weapon in this, of course, is Thor, who knows Galactus and has faced Galactus before, both as an adversary and as a villain, as an adversary and as a friend. And surprisingly, because Galactus is so weak from his battle with Terrax and from starving, they get some good licks in. And, Thor, he's pretty powerful. And one of my favorite parts of this whole story is when Spider-Man and Daredevil show up. And Spider-Man's like, hey, Red, time we got involved, wouldn't you say? And then Daredevil's just like, no, Spider-Man, I wouldn't. We're small-time superfolk compared to what's being unleashed down there. We'd just be in the way. So Daredevil's just like, what are we going to do against Galactus? So let's just hang out and watch the battle. And that's what Daredevil and Spider-Man end up doing. They watch the Fantastic Four and the Avengers fight Galactus. And one thing that helps turn the tide is Doctor Strange shows up as well. So yeah, Doctor Strange, one of the most powerful superheroes in the Marvel Universe because of his magical powers, is able to use one of his spells on Galactus. And while that's going on, the stretchy man, Mr. Fantastic, slingshots the thing right at Galactus, and the thing slams him in the head. And Galactus falls. Galactus falls. Look at that. That's awesome. So the Marvel superheroes do the impossible and actually defeat Galactus, which is kind of amazing. And there's Galactus after he has fallen. So now Galactus has fallen and he's pretty much dying, and they've defeated Galactus. So now they're like, well, now what do we do? And Reed Richards is like, well, we can't let him die. Because he's not really evil. He's just doing what he has to do to survive. So we can't just let him die. And Captain America's like, yeah, you're right. And Iron Man's like, are you guys nuts? He just tried to destroy the entire planet and everybody on it, and you wanna bring him back to life so he could do it all over again? That's ridiculous. Iron Man is not on board, but the Fantastic Four and Mr. Fantastic are like, well, kind of have to because we're superheroes, and we don't go around killing. And Captain America's like, yeah, pretty much, usually. Not all the time, but yeah, I mean, he's not really evil, so I guess we do have to kind of bring him back to life somehow and just hope for the best. So that's what they do. They have to save Galactus. And in the final part of the story, we're given this very 80s lady working out in her very 80s workout clothes. She's actually Frankie Ray's roommate. And the Fantastic Four's Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, stumbles in looking all disheveled and crappy. And he has to tell Frankie Ray's roommate what's happened to Frankie Ray. So we know that we have gone into the future a little bit, and something has happened to Johnny Storm's girlfriend. And he's going to tell the story of what happened. And that begins with Galactus here collapsed, and they've got to somehow save Galactus. And Galactus is actually shrinking. He's getting smaller as he's losing his power. And there's Iron Man arguing with Mr. Fantastic and Captain America about this whole thing. He just thinks it's crazy. But they instantly create this machine, just in an hour or something. They create this super complex machine to kind of jumpstart Galactus, which they do. And Galactus wakes up and he's like, okay, I'm back. Thanks, guys. I'm going to eat the planet now. And Reed Richards is like, you can't do that. We just brought you back to life. And he's like, well, eating planets is kind of my thing. What am I going to do? Terrax was my herald, and now he's gone, and he was pretty much a crappy herald anyway. Who am I going to have to find me a planet? I need to eat right now. But then Frankie Ray decides, hey, I'm literally the fifth wheel on the Fantastic Four. I want to go in outer space. I want to become Galactus's herald. And Johnny Storm's like, no, you can't do that. I lose every girlfriend I have on this goddamn book. You can't fly off with Galactus. She's like, yeah, I can. So Galactus sees that she has, superpowers already. And so he gives her extra superpowers so she could be his herald and go off into space. And John Byrne draws it all beautifully, and Johnny Storm can't handle it, so he's trying to follow her, but she goes too high up into space, and he can't follow her that far because there's no oxygen. And he doesn't have cosmic powers like she does now. So he falls back to Earth, and his life is miserable once again. Because, like I said, his love life is terrible and continues to be terrible. And Galactus seems to have temporarily regained some of his lost humanity and says, okay, guys, I got a new herald. I'm going to go off into space and devour some other planet. You guys lucked out. Thanks for the help, guys. And so he takes off. And he also says this before he leaves. Perhaps Galactus has learned an important truth this day. Earth shall never more need fear me. Yeah, right. For perhaps here, on this tiny whirling mote alone in all the cosmos, has Galactus truly found those he might dare name friends. And so Galactus is gone. We're still missing the 2 top stories of the Baxter Building. Johnny Storm is super depressed and miserable. And we leap forward in time, and the Baxter Building is being rebuilt. And Reed Richards finally gets rid of the landlord of the Baxter Building by buying the Baxter Building, which I don't know why he didn't do before. But he finally does that. And that is the end of the story. And we get the preview of the next story when, Franklin Richards starts doing creepy things once again. Franklin Richards, he was a pain in the ass as a kid. So that was it. That was the return of Galactus. And John Byrne's really great story. It was a wonderful little 3-issue story about Galactus returning to Earth and the evil Terrax causing incredible destruction. And of course, during all of this, the island of New York was put back where it was. I forgot to mention that. It was just put back, No problem. We tore off the island and made it fly into space, but everything's fine now. It's back. No structural issues at all. It's all fine. So yeah, it all worked out in the end, except for Johnny Storm, who's miserable. Well, you can't have everything in life. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.